Whether you agree that's their intent or not, that's who's showing up next on the scene. Not Christ, but Antichrist. Now, there's something else going on in Israel, though, and it's actually set to take place. Now, they're on a different time zone, of course, but basically it's set to take place today, September 26th. They are planning to conduct an animal sacrifice. Yes, a literal animal sacrifice on an altar in Jerusalem for the Noahide covenant for the 70 nations. Now, animal sacrifices are not something that we do at this point as Christians, certainly. Christ was our final Passover lamb, the perfect Passover lamb, and the one and all time sacrifice for the sins of the people. So they basically, again, are more or less not only disobeying God, blaspheming Christ, and this League of 70 Nations, you can look into it, and I would encourage you to do so if you haven't. This is what they want to use to replace the United Nations because they have admitted as much. This is what will be the framework and probably literally the body for the end times political beast, the end times one world system. They need to take out the United Nations again. They have admitted they want this to replace the United Nations because they said the United Nations is too secular. But don't get carried away with that. Don't get carried away with that any more than Trump going and speaking out for religious freedom at the United Nations. Anything that is just a generic, all faiths welcome, let's come worship God, is a contradiction to Christ, who said He is the only way, that He is the way, the truth, and the life. And when you get into mixing other traditions from religion, other religions, idolatry, other gods, you're going against the God of the Bible. You're going against Jesus Christ. You want nothing to do with that. But that's what they are even going to do later today in Israel, and that is their plan when it comes to this end times one world system. Now, in the remaining 12 and a half minutes that I have, because I do want to touch on this story as well, because what we also had was this Greta Thunberg, I believe. I don't know if it's Thunberg or Thunberg. I would guess it's Thunberg. I don't watch a lot of mainstream media, so I haven't heard anybody pronounce her name. But this 16-year-old girl, this poor, unfortunate 16-year-old girl, who literally has Asperger's syndrome. It's on the autistic spectrum. It's a type of autism. Actually, no joke or no lie, kind of an ironic thing that I believe Al Gore has the same malady. But this girl, who does have a mental malady, who does have a mental, call it a mental illness, call it a mental condition, but she has a disease, has been so propagandized, has had so much fear-mongering, lies, manipulation, propaganda fed into her skull from who knows when it started. Probably as soon as she went to school, if not before. My understanding is she started having nightmares about climate catastrophes and the destruction of ecosystems and mass extinctions and so on and so forth. But this child has become so broken, and you can draw your own theories, and I have, but really I do believe, and it's possible there's something else going on, but from the surface, she is so broken and just so angry. I didn't watch her speech, I didn't listen to her speech, but in every photo I saw of her, almost every photo, she looked enraged. She was saying things like, "How dare you? You have destroyed my dreams." Again, how dare you? She said over and over again. Just mad. No joy, no peace, no contentment. not even living the life of a 16-year-old girl, but this petrified, terrified, angry ball of hate that one way or another she has become. And it's all based off of lies. You can investigate, and I would encourage you, and I would encourage even anybody who believes in man-made global warming. First of all, the IPCC, which is where this all started, was formed in 1988. Wasn't really formed by scientists, so to speak. It was formed by people within the United Nations. And it was even formed by somebody connected to Rothschild. And they went into this with the pre-drawn conclusion that man-made global warming, or that we have warming because of man, and because of man spitting out all of this CO2 into the atmosphere. You know, oddly, when I was a kid in school, I was told that carbon dioxide was actually beneficial. You know, it's something that we exhale naturally, that plants take it in, and that plants as a byproduct actually give off oxygen. And so it's this synchronicity, and it's this kind of symbiotic, mutually beneficial relationship in which carbon dioxide, good for plants, oxygen, good for people, everything gets to live and thrive. And yet now we have demonized carbon dioxide. You can go down through history. There were times in this planet in which carbon dioxide was tens of times, hundreds of times, thousands of times, or at least 1,000 or 2,000 times higher in terms of parts per million than what it is right now, and you still had life that thrived. You had ferns that grew up to 25 meters in height. You had, during the time that the Romans essentially ruled the world, it was a hotter time, it was a warmer climate than what we have right now. And guess what? People survived. And they have manipulated and tried to cover up and ignore. They have manipulated data. They have skewed numbers. They have used phony math. All of this is documented if you just actually take the time to research it. And they call it settled science. They're not even doing science. Because true science, true objective science, accepts the truth wherever it may lead and searches for the truth wherever it may lead. Meaning what? Meaning you can have a hypothesis and you can have a theory. But if you have documented evidence that shows that your hypothesis or your theory may be incorrect, then you take that evidence, you look at it, and you make adjustments wherever that leads. They're trying to cover up the evidence. For instance, you know how they got this 97% of all scientists agree that man-made global warming is real? It's not 97% of all scientists. It is what happened. It wasn't even a scientist that declared it, or that found it, or that conducted some study. It was a science student who took a sample size of around 3,150. I believe it was 3,146 scientists who had written papers. Of those 3,146, she pared that down to 79 scientists who wrote specifically about climate change. Of those 79 scientists, she found that 77 of them had basically said, yeah, man-made global warming is causing this. But it wasn't 97%, it was about 25% of her sample size that said man-made global warming is real. And you've had tens of thousands of scientists since then who have said that it is not real, or that we need more study, that the science is not settled. But, hopefully as a Christian, if you are a Christian, and this is where I will this is where I will finish. I've got about 5 minutes, but hopefully you know, for instance, in Genesis, the last verse of Genesis chapter 8, right after Noah came off the ark, Noah and his family and all those that were on the ark, you had God that made a covenant with Noah, and as part of that covenant, including the covenant never to destroy the earth again, all life on earth with a flood, but right there in Genesis chapter 8, verse 22, and the last verse of that chapter, you've got God saying this is a promise, an eternal promise from Almighty God that says, while the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, and I'll add even spring and fall, and day and night shall not cease. In other words, God has established these things. God has established the time to plant, the time to sow, and the time to reap. God has established variations in temperature. God has established the seasons. And God has established the rising and the setting of the sun, and the day and night. And He has made that promise that those things will never go away as long as we're here at this time on earth. But as I looked at it, and I don't know how much time, just take a look at Job chapter 38. I'll go quickly. Job, God actually declaring to Job, asking Job questions. Job 38:4, where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare if thou hast understanding. Where were these where were these global warming alarmists when God laid the foundations of the earth? Were they there? Well, you could say maybe if you want to get technical, but no, they don't have understanding or recall of that. Who hath laid the measures thereof, if thou knowest, or who hath stretched the line upon it? Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened, or who laid the cornerstone thereof? Skipping ahead now, or who shut up, verse 8, or who shut up the sea with doors when it brake forth, as if it had issued out of the womb? Who set the foundations? Who put all the oceans in place, Job? Was it man? No, it was God. When I made the cloud and garment thereof, and a thick darkness a swaddling band for it, and brake it up from my decreed place, and set bars and doors, and said, Hereto shalt thou come, but no further, and here shall thy proud waves be stayed. In other words, God controls even the tide, and how far, how much the sea rises, how far it comes in. Verse 12. Hast thou commanded the morning since thy days, and caused the dayspring to know his place, that it might take hold of the ends of the earth, that the wicked might be shaken out of it? And again, I am running out of time here. Hast thou entered into the springs of the sea, verse 16, or hast thou walked in the search of the depth? I want to touch on some weather here if I can. Verse 22, hast thou entered into the treasures of the snow, or hast thou seen the treasures of the hail? Do you know what makes up the snow, Job? Do you know the elements that make up hail? Hail even that you can read that He has reserved until the end times. Right here in 23, which I have reserved against the time of trouble, against the day of battle and of war. Right there in Job, way back in Job even, end times prophecy of those 180 or so pound hailstones that He will use at that time. Point being, God has control of the weather. God has control of the elements. God has control of the sea. And He's never lost control of it. Even that He has those hailstones reserved for that time when it comes. So, you can believe lies, or you can believe God. And actually, I did want to go one other place. Unfortunately, I'm not going to have time with it. But I'll say, as this continues, keep in mind the raiser of taxes, as they're using this global carbon taxation system, and understand that that's probably coming. And you will probably see, I believe, the United States enter back into it. And maybe that even leads to the deadly wound down the road. But I am so out of time. This has been Jason Hawes on American Faith Today. Everybody take care. Have a great day. Great week. God bless. Be safe.